Welcome to my much awaited tutorial for the Ivy Cami top. I'm going to walk you through step by step and show you how to work in this lovely Jasmine stitch, which creates these 6 petal flowers, which looks really cute. So follow along with the tutorial and we will be able to create together. Paintbox yarn DK cotton. You can buy this on lovecrafts.com. I used about 4 of these 50-gram balls and a 4mm crochet hook. We are going to start by making a slip knot. To create the Jasmine stitch, you need to work in puff stitch. To make a puff, take your yarn and begin by chaining 2. So that's 1, 2. Then what we're going to do next is pull up the yarn about a centimetre or so. Try and keep this the same size each time to make sure the sizes are consistent. You're now going to yarn over and insert the hook into the very first chain stitch right before the slip knot and pull through the yarn to create another loop. Then repeat this process twice more, so you'll do a total of 3 yarn overs plus the first loop that you already started with on your hook. At this point you can then quickly count. You should have 7 loops in total. You're then going to yarn over once more because we need a total of 8 stitches. You now need to use your thumb to hold on to the last loop and stop it from being pulled through. And then as you slide your hook through, keep your thumb on that stitch to make sure it doesn't disappear. Pull through all of your loops and then go through that very first stitch, pull through 1 loop, and then chain 1 to secure all of these stitches together. And you've now created 1 puff stitch. Now going to chain 1, pull up the yarn, and this will begin our second puff stitch. For the second puff stitch we're going to repeat the same process. So yarn over and insert your hook in between the 2 base stitches just before your chain 1. Now you're going to do your 3 yarn overs, which once you've finished will leave you with 7 loops on the hook. Then yarn over and grab the last stitch. This will be a total of 8 stitches including the end one. Remember to hold on to it and pull through all of your loops, go back in to the very end stitch and pull through, then chain 1 to secure the puff. Let's do some more puff stitches. So chain 1 and pull up the yarn, remembering to keep it the same size if you can. Then do a total of 3 yarn overs, inserting your hook in between the 2 foundation stitches and pulling through a total of 3 yarn overs plus the very first stitch. This should leave you with 7 loops on your hook once you're done, and then yarn over for the last 8th stitch, pull through holding on to the last stitch, pull through the very end stitch and chain 1 to finish. From here you need to continue and create as many puff stitches as you need to create the width of your top. So I would recommend you keep going until you feel that the chain is long enough, and you can stop and measure by wrapping it around yourself as you go so that you can see how many more stitches you need. I've put a guide to how many stitches I would suggest. I'm going to be doing 32 puff stitches to create a size small. You will need to leave a little bit of space at the back because we're going to create the lattice closed design so that you can tie the top at the back, and that will be adjustable, so you don't need to get this down to an exact art because you will be able to adjust how tightly you want to fasten it at the end. I've now completed my 32 puff stitches, so you can see I've got a long chain and they are all the same size. Now what we need to do is create 1 more puff stitch exactly the same, and that is going to take us up the same way that you would normally chain 1 to turn. We are going to create 1 puff stitch to turn. So pull up the yarn and do your 3 yarn overs exactly the same as you have been doing before and complete that last puff stitch. So I'll now have a total of 33. Once you've done your turning stitch, we're going to go into the second row of the Jasmine stitch. So this starts out in the same way. You're going to pull through 1 loop, go ahead and do your 3 yarn overs, and then when you get to the end, keep all of these loops on your hook. We're going to do the final yarn over and just hold it there. So you've now got 8 loops on the hook. We need to insert the hook into the space between the last 2 puff stitches, and we're going to need to do another 8 loops. This will be a total of 4 yarn overs into this chain space, and then 1 final yarn over at the end, which you're going to hold your finger on. Then we're going to do this one more time into the next chain space. We want to do another 4 yarn overs to pull through another 8 loops. So this will leave 3 bunches of 8 loops on your hook. So after the very last yarn over, you should have a total of 24 loops. Hold on to the very last stitch and pull through all of the loops together. Then slip through the one that you've still got between your finger and thumb, pull through, and chain 1 to close all of those stitches together. We're going to repeat this process again. So chain 1 and pull up the yarn. We're going to count this as the first loop, so yarn over again, and a second time, and a third time. Then remember this last yarn over to create the 8th loop before you pull through into the next chain space 1, 2, 3, 4 times, and a final yarn over. And then in the next chain space, yarn over and pull through 1, 2, 3, 4. And a final yarn over, which we're going to grab onto and pull through all 24 loops. We are going to carry on working the same way until we reach the end of the row, so you essentially need to pull up a total of 24 loops. If you prefer, you might find it easier to count all of the loops instead of the yarn overs, in which case you need to count 3 sets of 8 loops. Or you can do it my way and count the yarn overs. It's 4 yarn overs each time, but on the very first one I count the first loop as number 1, so it will be 3 yarn overs and then 4. I hope that makes sense. I'm now at the very end of the row, and to do my last stitch, or my last set of 3, pull up the yarn and pull through 8 loops where we are, then 8 loops in the next chain space, we're going to put our final 8 loops into the very end chain right at the beginning. From here, pull through holding onto the last stitch and close all of your puffs together. Then we're going to chain 1 to turn the work and pull up the yarn. Here we're going to create another single puff stitch like we did at the beginning. This is just to turn the work so that we begin the next row. So we've got 1 loop on the hook. I'm going to yarn over it and pull through 1, 2, 3 more. Then the final yarn over I'm going to hold and close off just 1 solitary puff stitch on its own. You need to remember to do this when you turn every row, otherwise the work is going to get smaller and smaller at each row you complete. The next row is exactly the same as the previous one, so we're going to go ahead and pull through 8 loops on top of the one that we just created to turn. Then we're going to go down into the chain space right before that puff stitch that we just made, pull through 8 loops, and then another 8 on the chain space right next to it, exactly as we have been doing. Then once you've got your total of 24 loops, you're going to remember to hold on to the very last stitch and draw all of those stitches together. Chain 1 and pull up the yarn to begin the next stitch. Carry on working until you reach the end of the row. You can see I'm now at the end of row number 2, so I'm going to complete the last stitch, yarn over and pull through, and then create my 24 loops The last 8 are going to be in the very end chain stitch, right at the edge of the row below. If you're enjoying the video so far, please give it a thumbs up, and I would love for you to subscribe so you can see all of my tutorials. Once you've finished your very last stitch, remember to create the one solitary puff stitch by itself to turn the work, and then carry on working in exactly the same way. You can create as many rows as you like to give the top the desired length. I've done a total of 8 rows, and this is how wide it is. It is still pretty cropped, so if you would like to make this more full length, keep going and carry on until you reach the top. And at this point, I'm going to show you how to create the neck design. From the top corner, I want you to count in 9 puff stitches, and this is where the neck shaping is going to start. So count through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Then keep hold of that little chain space in between the 9th puff stitch and place a stitch marker. Then need to do the same on the other side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and that's where I'm going to attach my yarn. You need to make sure that you attach your yarn on the right side because we're working from right to left. If you added any additional puff stitches to the overall width, I started with 32. If you started with 34, then I would recommend that you count in 10 puff stitches and so on and so forth. See the description box for my guide so that you know where to begin your neck design. Once you've got your yarn attached, pull the yarn up and we're going to create 8 loops on our hook. Now the difference here is that we're not going to create a solitary puff stitch to create a straight turn. We're going to move straight into the next space and pull through our 8 loops. Once I do my final yarn over, I've got 16 loops on the hook, and I'm going to go ahead and pull through and join these together. So I've just done 2 chain spaces and I haven't done the foundation chain to turn. I'm then going to pull up the yarn and move on to the next stitch. We're now going to carry on working as we have been previously, so go ahead and create your 24 loops. So just to reiterate, the very first stitch where we started, we skipped the foundation chain and we've only joined 16 loops together instead of 24, and that's just to create the angle around the neckline, and then from there carry on creating sets of 8 loops times 3, so 24 in total, just exactly the same way that we've created the main body. I am now reaching my stitch marker, so I'm going to draw up 8 loops and then another 8 loops, and then the final 8 is going to be coming from the space exactly where the stitch marker is, and that's to let me know that we've now reached the end and we don't need to go on any further. So we're going to draw all of those last 24 stitches together and then chain 1, and now we're ready to turn the work. You can see we've got this nice angle now starting to form to create the shape of the top. So you can go ahead and remove that stitch marker because we don't need that anymore. So we're ready to turn the work. Pull through one chain and pull up the yarn, and then flip the work over. We're now going to draw through 8 loops, and we're not going to be creating a foundation chain because we're still creating the sloped angle around the neck. So move on to the second chain space and draw through another 8 loops, and then we're going to draw these 16 loops together to close. Then chain 1, pull up the yarn, and carry on creating 3 puff stitches at a time, 8 stitches for each, so 24 loops, until you reach the opposite side. I am now just doing the very last stitch, and I'm at the end of this row. Now chain 1 and pull up the yarn to turn the work over. Now we've just got one more row to do to finish the neckline, so this will be the 3rd row. So again, we're going to skip the foundation turning chain, and to start with we're going to draw up 8 loops, another 8 loops from the next chain space, and close those 16 loops together. Then once you've done that, draw up the yarn and carry on working 3 sets of 8 loops until you reach the end. I am now just finishing my very last set of 3 puff stitches, so I'm going to do my final 8 loops from the very top corner and then pull all of those 24 loops together to finish. This is what your neckline will look like when you've finished those 3 rows. From here, don't detach the yarn because we're going to go straight into creating the strap. So we're going to create a nice long chain. I've done a chain of 75 stitches to create my strap. You can do it even longer if you prefer. We just need this to be long enough to travel all the way up and tie in a bow at the shoulder. Once you've got your long chain of 75 stitches, we are going to stop and slip stitch our way back down to the beginning. To do this, we're going to chain 1 to turn and then insert into the previous stitch, and we don't need to chain 1, just pull straight through the loop that's on your hook. So continue inserting your hook and just pulling through to slip stitch all the way back down until you reach the start of the chain. I'm now back down at the point that I started from, and so to anchor this strap down, I'm going to insert the hook into the very base of the chain, pull through the yarn and join it at the bottom. I'm now going to move straight on into creating the border. To do this, we're going to single crochet all the way around the edge. Because we've got puff stitches, what I would do is insert 3 single crochets into each of the lengths of the puff stitch and then 1 into the chain space. Obviously this might vary depending on how big or how small you've made your puff stitches and the size of your yarn. Just do as many as you think fits nicely. It doesn't really matter how many you do, but just try and keep it consistent for all of them, and keep working all the way along the top edge of the border. We need to create another strap on the back for this to tie onto. So I've counted in 3 puff stitches from the corner, and this is where I'm going to make my second strap. So I'm going to chain another 75 stitches, same length as the first one, and then once I've reached the top, slip stitch all the way back down exactly the same. So I've just finished the strap on the back, and I'm going to carry on with the border. So insert the hook into the base right below where you started the strap from and pull through just to secure it, and then carry on with your single crochet until you reach the side panel. Once you reach the very end stitch and place a single crochet, I'm going to place another single crochet in exactly the same spot, so the very end chain space, and that's to turn so that I'm now going to be working along the short edge, and that's to give it a nice corner, and then carry on creating the border exactly the same. We're going to keep going until we finish this short edge, so keep going with the border stitch, and then when you reach the bottom corner we're going to stop there and we're going to turn back and create the fastening. So you can see I'm now at the bottom corner and we're going to stop the border stitch. At this point we're going to chain one and turn the work over, so flip it around, and then from here we're going to create the loops for the tie closure at the back. So I'm going to do this by chaining up 3 stitches, and then I'm going to count 3 stitches and skip those. Then I'm going to single crochet into 5 stitches, so chain 3 and skip 3, then single crochet 5. You can see that's created this nice little loop for us to thread the tie through, and then we're going to create another loop here, so we're going to chain up 1, 2, 3, skip 3 stitches and single crochet 5 again. Carry on this way until you reach the bottom. For me, I created a total of 4 loops. If you've got a longer top, then you'll end up having more loops. If it doesn't fit quite perfectly, you don't have to do 5. If you need to, you kind of single crochet 3 or 4, that's absolutely fine. Just try and space them out as best you can so that it looks visually pleasing. So I've just created my last loop and I'm doing 1 single crochet in the top corner, and then I'm going to pull through the yarn and cut it off because we're finished with this section. So now we're going to spin the work round and attach our yarn in the very bottom corner so that we can carry on with our border. So once you've tied the yarn, we're going to carry on with our single crochet all the way along the bottom edge. Carry on with this border stitch all the way along this long bottom edge, turn the corner, and we're going to stop in this top corner here. And in this corner we're going to flip the work over and go back down again, creating the loops for the fastening, just like we did on the other side. So I've now just finished the loops. You can see that we've got nice loops on both sides and a nice border all the way along the bottom. I'm going to attach the yarn in this top right hand corner, and then we're going to single crochet in 3 puff stitches, and at this point we're going to create a strap. Make sure that you do it in exactly the same place that you created it on the opposite side. If it helps, you can count in the number of stitches and then pop a stitch marker so that you don't have to remember, and you will know to stop and create your strap when you get to this point. When you get to your stitch marker, single crochet once into that chain space, and then we're going to chain 75 stitches, or the same number that you have created on both of the other straps, and then slip stitch our way back down again. I'm now at the bottom of that strap, so I'm going to insert the hook into the very base section and pull through a slip stitch just to secure it. Then I'm going to carry on with my border stitch until I reach the next top corner where I need to produce the 4th and final strap. I'm now in the top right hand corner. I'm going to chain up 75 stitches, slip stitch all the way back down, secure the strap, and then you must remember to finish off your border along the very top section until you reach the strap on the left hand side. Then once you reach this section, you can go ahead and cut your yarn, pull it through, and you are all finished. The last step left for us to do is sew in any of these loose ends that we have got, so you'll need to grab yourself a darning needle and I'll show you how to hide them. Make sure that you're working on the inside, so if your tail is on the front like mine is, sew it through to the underside, and then you're going to take your darning needle and you're going to poke through the back section of some of your stitches and pull through to hide the tail. Go ahead and snip off the excess. If you've got any that are in the center of the work, you can hide them in the back of the Jasmine stitches. You just want to feed the needle through on a diagonal and hide the yarn in the inside of some of the Jasmine puff stitches. Once your ends are all hidden away, the last thing left to do is create your long chain to tie up the back of the top. So for this, I chained up around 250 stitches. You'll need to make it even longer if your top is a longer length than mine, and then slip stitch all the way back down. We can then use this to thread through all of those loops that we made in a crisscross at the back and tie it in a bow at the bottom, and we're all finished. I really hope that you've enjoyed the tutorial and that you're happy with your finished result. If you get stuck, please leave me a comment below and I'll try to reply to as many comments as I see. And if you're posting any pictures on social media, please tag me IAknitwear on Instagram. I'd love to see how you got on.